swim with you.
I'm gonna get you.
I'm gonna be your best friend. Good feelings gone. I can't see! I don't know where I'm going! The mask!
What mask? Okay, I can't see a thing.
Oh, gee!
Hey, look, a mask!
Read it!
I'm sorry, but if you could just bring a little closer, I kinda need the light. That's great. Keep it right there.
Just read it!
Okay. Mr. Bossy. P. Okay, P. Share. P. Shirley. P. Not Shirley. Oh, the first line's P. Sherman.
P. Sherman doesn't make any sense!
Okay, second line. 42.
Don't eat me, don't eat me.
42.
Whoa!
Light, please. Voila. The second line's 42, Wallaby Way.
That's great. Just finish up here. Speed read. Take a guess. No pressure, no problem. There's a lot of pressure. Pressure! Take a guess now with pressure.
Sydney! It's Sydney!
Hello, and welcome back to the Great Aspirations ACT Prep Series. In this video, we're going to look at reading detail questions, starting with this one made from the clip. The writing on the mask that Dory finds reads, A. P. Sherman, 40 Wallaby Way, Sydney. B. T. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. C. P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. Or D. C. Sherman, 32 Wallaby Way, Sydney. Unlike other question types, we can't do much to analyze the right and wrong answers of detail questions. There's really no critical thinking to be done about the answer choices. The bottom line is that 3 of the answer choices are not in the passage, and 1 of them is in the passage. 3 of these answer choices are not written on the mask, and 1 of them is. Most of the time, detail questions won't even factor into the plot. In this example, it doesn't matter whether it's P. Sherman, or T. Sherman, or C. Sherman. The plot is unaffected. It doesn't matter, for the plot, what the first initial of the mask's owner is. And this kind of thing makes it hard to remember exactly which detail is the right one. You can't work backward from major plot points to find out which detail is correct because they don't have anything to do with major plot points. And it's also why it's important to read for structure. If you have the structure of the passage in your head when you go back to find the detail, you'll be able to find the correct detail very quickly. On the other hand, if you don't know where to look and you don't remember the detail, you'll have to scan the entire passage searching for the correct answer. A huge waste of time, and something I wouldn't recommend. If we know where to look in the clip, right when Dory is repeating the address written on the mask, we can find the right answer in only a few seconds. In this case, it's answer choice C. So let's look at another clip, and as we do, let's try to map out the major plot points rather than paying attention to any individual details.
Mr. Perry, will you read the opening paragraph of the preface entitled Understanding Poetry?
Understanding Poetry by Dr. J. Evans Pritchard, Ph.D. To fully understand poetry, we must first be fluent with its meter, rhyme, and figures of speech. Then ask 2 questions. 1, how artfully has the objective of the poem been rendered? And 2, how important is that objective? Question 1 rates the poem's perfection. Question 2 rates its importance. And once these questions have been answered, determining the poem's greatness becomes a relatively simple matter. If the poem's score for perfection is plotted on the horizontal of a graph, and its importance is plotted on the vertical, then calculating the total area of the poem yields the measure of its greatness. A sonnet by Byron might score high on the vertical, but only average on the horizontal. A Shakespearean sonnet, on the other hand, would score high both horizontally and vertically, yielding a massive total area. thereby revealing the poem to be truly great. As you proceed through the poetry in this book, practice this rating method. As your ability to evaluate poems in this manner grows, so will your enjoyment and understanding of poetry.
Excrement. That's what I think of Mr. J. Evans Pritchard. We're not laying pipe. We're talking about poetry. How can you describe poetry like American Bandstand? Well, I like Byron. I give him a 42, but I can't dance to it. Now, I want you to rip out that page. Go on. Rip out the entire page. You heard me. Rip it out. Rip it out! Go on. Rip it out! Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Gentlemen, tell you what, don't just tear out that page. Tear out the entire introduction. I want it gone. History. Leave nothing of it. Rip it out. Rip!
The title of the article that the teacher asks the students to rip out is A. Great poetry, B. Reading great poetry, C. Evaluating poetry, or D. Understanding poetry. Now, before you rush to find an answer to the question, I want you to think about where you might find the answer, relative to the major plot points in the clip, and compared to the clip as a whole. Would it be right at the beginning? At the end? Right before the teacher tells the student to rip out the page, perhaps? Or maybe right after? Or maybe in the middle of the student reading the article? Most of these are silly. You see, while the details don't affect the plot, they do have a strong presence within the plot, making them easy to find if you have the plot in your head. In other words, detail questions can go fast if you read for structure. In this clip, the title obviously wasn't announced in the middle of the article. That's not where the title would be on an article. No, the only place that it makes sense to find the name of the article is at the beginning of the clip, when the teacher tells the student which article to read aloud for the class. And if we refer back to the beginning of the clip,
Harry, will you read the opening paragraph of the preface entitled Understanding Poetry?
Understanding Poetry by Dr. J. Evans Pritchard, Ph.D.
we see that the correct answer choice is very easy to find. This is what detail questions normally look like. You won't be given a line number. Your job is to search the passage for the answer, which will be necessary because the detail that you're searching for will be very hard to remember. Because of this, it's important to have a good sense of the plot points in your head, even if those plot points are very simple. Take this 3 plot point summary. If we have this plot in mind, and we go back to look for the correct answer, we only have to look through a few seconds of the clip. If we don't have the plot in mind, we might have to search the entire thing. On an actual reading passage, this is the single biggest time suck. Because detail questions are about 1/3 of the questions on the reading section, the most common question type in this section, how you manage your time in approaching them is vital. If you have to scan the entire passage for a detail, it will be easy to miss. You may even have to scan it multiple times. Whereas, if you know where to look, you can scan much more quickly and thoroughly through a small portion of the passage. And this brings us to the strategy of detail questions. Many of you may already read for structure, and that's great. That's a fantastic skill. Those of you who do will already have this strategy down. But for those of you who don't, you have to read for structure to do well on the ACT reading section. Have a few plot points in mind after you get through the section. And when you get to your detail question, think about which plot point the detail will be nearest to, or even which part of that plot point it will be in, and search there for your answer. Once you find the answer, mark it off and move on. If you do happen to remember the answer at the beginning, great. Mark the correct answer, and if you aren't in time trouble, spend 5 or 10 seconds checking to make sure that you are right. If you are in time trouble, of course, move along. But hold on. What do you do if your detail isn't where you think it is? Whatever you do, don't scan the whole passage several times and waste minutes trying to find it. You just don't have the time. Instead, skip that question and revisit it at the end of the passage. You may find the detail is somewhere else when answering another question, and if nothing else, you'll be more familiar with the structure and contents of the passage by the end of the section. But if you finished all of the other questions in the passage and you still don't know the answer or even where to look for the answer, move on to the next passage. It's easy to come back to detail questions after you've completed the entire test, if you have time later.